Have you ever thought about a famine so bad it could bring an entire civilization to its knees? Well, we're about to dive into the biblical story of a crisis just like that in ancient Egypt. And, more importantly, the absolutely radical plan one man came up with to save everyone. A plan that would end up changing the nation forever. It all kicks off with this incredibly desperate plea. You can just feel the panic in these words. This wasn't just a bad harvest. This was a full-blown existential crisis, gripping not just Egypt, but all the lands around it. The people are at their absolute limit, and this quote really sets the stage for the incredibly high stakes of what's about to unfold. So, right in the middle of all this chaos, two different groups show up in Egypt looking for help. And what's so fascinating is how their stories run side by side but end up in two completely different places. These outcomes, they tell us everything. So, first up, you have Joseph's own family. They trek all the way from Canaan, which is also getting hammered by the famine. They're shepherds, and they basically just ask for a place to stay. And Pharaoh's response? He doesn't just say yes, he tells Joseph, give them the best part of the land. So they settle in Goshen, Egypt's prime real estate. They get land, they get food for everyone, they are completely taken care of. Okay, remember that part. Now let's flip the coin and look at the actual Egyptians. While Joseph's family is getting settled in the lap of luxury, the situation for the local population is going from bad to worse. The famine is just relentless and their resources are vanishing. So what's Joseph's plan for them? Well, it's not a relief package. It's a deal, a very methodical three-step plan to sell them grain. And he's got a very specific order of operations here, moving from one type of asset to the next, as the people run out of things to pay with. Step one is pretty straightforward: money, cold, hard cash. Joseph starts collecting every single coin, not just in Egypt, but in Canaan too, in exchange for grain. And he does this until, as the text says, the money was all gone. Every last piece of silver is gathered up and funneled straight into Pharaoh's palace. Okay, so the money's gone. What's next? Joseph moves on to step two. He tells the people, all right, bring me your livestock. For one more year of survival, the Egyptians trade away everything. Their horses, their sheep, their cattle, their donkeys. We're talking about their engines of agriculture, their transportation, basically their entire capital wealth. And after that year, they've got nothing. Nothing but the dirt under their feet and their own two hands. And this desperation leads them to the final, most extreme step, which, and this is key, they propose themselves. They say, buy us and our land. They are literally offering up their freedom and their ancestral homes just to stay alive. And that offer, that is the trigger for the main event, what we're calling the Great Egyptian Exchange. This is the moment it stops being just about buying food. This is about completely rewriting the rules of society, the relationship between the people, the land, and the guy in charge. Joseph takes the deal. On behalf of Pharaoh, he buys it all. Every last plot of private land in Egypt. The entire population becomes landless. In one move, the state becomes the sole landowner, and the people are essentially reduced to serfs, working on the very fields their families had owned for generations. Now, with this massive economic shift complete, Joseph doesn't just leave things there. He decides to make it official. He creates a permanent law to govern this new reality for Egypt from that point on. He calls it the Law of the Fifth. And it's pretty simple. Moving forward, 1/5, that's 20%, of every harvest belongs to Pharaoh. It's a permanent, nationwide tax that solidifies the state's claim on all future productivity. Forever. But look at how this deal gets framed. Joseph doesn't present it as, I've taken your land and now you owe me 20%. No, he says, here is seed for you. He makes it seem like a gift. The 20% goes to Pharaoh, sure, but the narrative is that they get to keep the other 80%. He literally saved their lives, so from their point of view, it was a pretty good deal. But, there's always an exception to the rule, right? In this massive nationwide land transfer, there was one group whose property was untouched, the priests. And why? Because they were already on Pharaoh's payroll. They got a regular stipend, so they never got desperate enough to need to sell their land in the first place. And all of this just perfectly sets up this tale of two fates. It's such a stark contrast. On one side, you have the Egyptians. They sold their land, they became servants, and they survived, but at the cost of their freedom. And on the other side, the Israelites. They acquired property in the best part of the land, they thrived, and the text says they increased greatly. Two groups, one famine, two wildly different outcomes. But the story doesn't just end with this massive economic restructuring. Years go by, and the focus starts to shift, away from the power of controlling land to a different kind of value altogether, the power of heritage, of belonging. And we see this through the final wishes of the patriarch, Jacob. Jacob lives in Egypt for 17 really good years. His family is safe, they're prosperous, but when he's on his deathbed, even with all this wealth and security, he makes Joseph swear a solemn oath. He says, "Do not bury me in Egypt." Even though he's surrounded by family and fortune, his heart is somewhere else. He wants to go home, to be buried with his ancestors in his homeland. And that really leaves us with a pretty deep question to think about. We've just seen a story where a ruler gained total control over a nation's land in exchange for survival. And at the same time, we see a man living on the very best of that land whose only dying wish was to leave it. So it makes you wonder, what's the ultimate legacy? Is it about controlling the land, or is it about truly belonging to one?